Those who survived became cloud adults, meaning they spread the bacteria to others, even non-vaccinated. Amazing coincidence, right? Very.
Talking about the Spanish flu and how they tried to stop the spread, but meanwhile, everybody who survived only ended up getting others contagious. Quite funny. I thought it was interesting how Pope Francis became the first pope in 728 years to open the holy door of the 13th century Basilica della Aquila, Italy, on Sunday during a visit to the Italian city located about 70 miles northeast of Rome. I just shared it because typically it is kind of weird to have changes in I don't know how to say it. There's usually some weird, funny woo-woo at the end of all these things, but that's not the point. Let's show this video.
I went on a 2-year Mormon mission in France. I thought God would take away my homosexuality. Nope, I'm gay. Whatevs, I'm over it. It took me a while, but after my mission, I went voluntarily to conversion therapy to become straight. I was platonically dating a woman, but it felt dishonest because she deserves someone who loves her breasticles. Flash forward to the modern LGBTQIA XYZ MAP plus mafia. They are literally telling me that if I will not date a trans man with a vagina, I'm transphobic. They are way worse than my conversion therapist. They are the ones pushing conversion therapy. Gays and lesbians, spill the TQIA plus, honey. The modern trans movement is about pharmaceutical companies pushing hormones and surgery. Duh. Common sense, consenting adult gays and lesbians are waking up.
Wake up, people. Wake up. Very interesting how, certain portions of demographics are kind of wisening up to the situation because, not just them, but a lot of people have been taken for the loop. A lot of people have been made useless idiots in order to push and propagate certain agendas without fully understanding the issue at hand. And there are a lot of voices who also want to speak out on this, but usually what they get met with is a lot of silencing, a lot of backlash, because the younger generations are too susceptible to the rhetoric that they won't fully play out consequences or consequential, what happens at the end of some of these conclusions. Oh yeah, I typed in the Macy's conference and its creation of the Tavistock Institute. I'm not gonna get in there yet. That's I've been working on that. That's very difficult to talk about. Literally anything. The Rockefeller Foundation. Is this a problem that can only be solved by using behavioral science to create an Orwellian hellscape? This meme explains the Macy Conference and the Tavistock Institute. Either way, moving on. USDA scatters rabies vaccines for wildlife in 13 states. Interesting number 13. But this is also something that happened in England. So, from what I understand, right, England doesn't have rabies. The whole country itself has no rabies, but that's because of efforts like this. Either way. CIA. Oh, yeah. CIA informants. China has apparently crippled certain spying operations, and this was published in 2017. And it wasn't just the CIA. There have been a lot of disappearing assets that have been occurring since 2018 up to present day. A lot of them happened in the Middle East during Trump's presidency, and that was because of certain activities that were going on. The U.S. Embassy employees have been evacuated from the green zone by helicopter. I was going to look for confirmation of this, but I didn't find any. So I was talking about a nuclear power plant in Ukraine. In the special building number 1 of the Zaporizhzhia NPP, on the roof of which the armed forces of Ukraine hit as a result of shelling, fresh fuel from the reactors is stored. So I think it was Ukraine's own forces that destroyed the fuel location for this nuclear power plant, and I think it's one of the reasons why they had to close this thing down. Now, this article kind of pissed me off. Normally, I try not to read the news because you know, don't mind you staying too much into the abyss. If you know, mind. Does this turn on? Yeah, okay, it turns on. Why am I no longer a neocon? Voted, okay, so she's talking about a story when she was younger. My brother and many of his friends returned with insider knowledge, which made them jaded about what the military had become. Very funny. No, this has been going on since World War II. I remember hearing about that phenomenon while growing up as a child, when I was as young as third grade. Now, ashamedly, voted for President George Bush. Re-election in a mock third grade polling station at school. It was always puzzling to me. It always puzzled me. Why did so many patriotic men come back from the war angry at the government that sent them? For many years, I chalked it up to stress and PTSD. Oh man, I'm just gonna skip that. Either way, these are only two examples of dozens that I could easily cite in which the U.S. trained and provided aid for a group using the "enemy of my enemy is my friend" formulation, only for them to turn on us, using our intelligence and our weaponry to do so. In Afghanistan, that took the form of many locals rejecting the corrupt Western-backed government. We used shady means to keep in power in Kabul. Slowly, the rhetoric of 9/11 is dismantling. It's unraveling itself because it goes with what I believe, that all of this is going to ramp down. Like, this is a controlled demolition of sorts, because if we were going full on demolition, I think I said this in the earlier video I did today, but that's what they've wanted ever since 2018. They've wanted to shake up the beehive. They wanted to kick it and make sure that everyone across the U.S. went wild, but they didn't get what they want, because there were enough educated people to prevent that from happening. A popular instance that I always like to cite with my friends is, here in the hood where I live, you literally had a Mexican gang go over to the supermarket and they prevented Antifa and all these stupid kids from going inside the store, because they told them, don't do this here. Like, this neighborhood needs these places. You should go do that to a richer neighborhood. But it was a really weird altercation to hear about, especially here in the hood. Oh yeah, Baltimore drug dealers threatened to shoot up the set of Apple TV Productions' Lady in the Lake, starring Natalie Portman, last week if they didn't stop filming on their block, and then ordered producers to pay them $50,000. The only reason why I shared this is because there's a statue here that I did a video for. Really weird. The statue is called the Lady of the Lake. I thought it was really weird how that just kind of popped up. Was modern art a weapon of the CIA? This is quite literally an article. This was by the BBC, and this one is by JSTOR. But I mainly got it from the video from Slazy. That's this guy's name. He dresses up this way. He actually dresses up this way for all of his live streams, but it's because he plays this character. He plays this like shady like music handler. What do you call those people that kind of like a promoter, like the person that books your shows? but he's the guy who books the shows of a band called Gwar, like GWAR. It's a heavy metal band, and he just plays this part that he's a crack dealer, and then he's just a funny guy. But very interesting how he talks about with the CIA. Let me just open up this article. It was in the years, let's see, it was during the Cold War. This was an aspect of the Cold War in the sense that they were opening up museums in parts of Europe to prevent the spread of communism. The relationship between modern art and American diplomacy began in World War II, when the Museum of Modern Art was mobilized for the war effort. MOMA. That's actually an art gallery that I know of here in Los Angeles, which is really weird. It was founded in 1929 by Abby Aldrich Rockefeller. A decade later, her son, Nelson Rockefeller, became president of the museum. But the point is, right, like if the CIA was already thinking of ways of using art in a Carl Jungian sense to affect the minds of individuals across a different country, to stop a different ideological stance from developing, goes to show a lot. Let me move on. Here we have yesterday Belgian farmers. Oh yeah, more farmers are mobilizing as always. And you have uprising in Iraq. It doesn't show anything too bad because these are other channels. As government forces opened fire on protesters, locals decided to respond with them with the same coin. Yeah, it's not a very interesting scenario that's developing out in Baghdad right now. Another one that I wanted to show is... No, I think that's it from this post. Oh yeah, Grassley requests Facebook. Grassley is a senator he's been the only senator to actually write letters and demand certain paperwork and demand certain things from not just Facebook, Twitter. When the big media tech conglomeracy committee was heard, Chuck Grassley was also one of the few that asked very difficult questions. But shout out to Grassley as usual. U.S. election company previously registered as a Chinese election company website. Let's not even go there. It's a very difficult topic for certain people. Here we have media viewer. Hold on.
He should simply come out against the shots and say he was lied to. And the corporate media spun it that I'd flip-flop, that, oh, I'm for DeSantis and now I'm for Trump. No, I said, Trump, I support you. You did so many good things. You fought the globalists. They hate your guts. They're setting you up. They're already leaving the sinking ship. You need to come out. And so Trump tried to call me. I missed the call. He reached out to one of his supporters, one of his advisors, and said, why is Alex saying this? So I shot an emergency message about a week and a half ago to Trump. He got it. He watched it. And then I got the response back. And Trump told the people that brought it to him, I've talked to him in the meeting, and Trump said, I don't want to hear about questioning this so-called vaccine again. I call it a so-called vaccine. He said, I don't want to hear about this again from anybody. I think it's good, and that's it. He should simply come.
Again, we're watching the setting up of a narrative, the setting up of positions, and how one group of people decided to do one thing and another group of people decided to do another thing. But in reality, he might be saying that Trump is saying, yes, take the vaccines are good. But what's not being said is his own, okay, so the private physician that Trump had while he was presidency has been a very vocal person. He's been very vocal against the narrative. And he was the one that prescribed Trump his vaccination status. So, but if you look at the paperwork, he never took any of the big major 3 shots. He had a different administration. So the language that's being used is what people are kind of picking apart. And I wanted to show this Jamie Foxx clip because it's fucking hilarious.
There's a lot of great people on both sides. Lots of great people on both sides. I know Harry O. He's a great person. He couldn't vote for me at the time. Now he can vote for me once he gets out. I love Snoop Deal Double G. Great person.
So do you love Death Row Records?
I love Death Row. I love Death. Excuse me. Fake news. I love Death Row.
That's the best impression that I've heard of Trump. Not many people actually have a good impression of him. Find out which one's the best for you. I can't show that too much. That will actually get me in trouble. Here we have Rob Schneider. Very interesting how this, he was one of the actors, right? This actor, alongside a bunch of other actors, were constantly in movies. They were constantly getting cameos and they were constantly getting airtime. And then all of a sudden, they all disappeared. A huge portion of the acting pool in here in LA just disappeared randomly. And one of the most interesting things that I've heard of under these circumstances is I think he brings it up, but not in this video. It's a different video where he's sitting on a couch and looks like he's in a lobby. And he talks about how he moved from California to Texas. And one of the things that I've learned is how certain states, governors, mayors will use large properties to kind of leverage over certain actors. Can't remember where I heard that from, but it has something to do with, imagine if you had a property and then all of a sudden the state decides to go after you for some unrelated issue just to kind of put a stop on you. Basically, to just have stuff leverage over you. And here's a video that I found of somebody.
I realized my sickness and infection needs natural antibiotic. I make my own natural antibiotic. 1/2 teaspoon cayenne pepper plus.
Yeah, very interesting. Like holistic remedies, and I think this was something that I heard from somebody called Cliff High. I think his channel's Cliff_High. Where he talks about how overall, one of the conclusions that is going to come from all of this distrust with pharmaceutical companies is the fact that we're going to move away from synthetic solutions and we're going to move back to holistic solutions. And I could show an Eddie Bravo clip that I avoided that portion of the video because, too much truth. I always like looking at architecture like this. And I remember why I made this whole thing bigger. Yeah, either way. I should probably fix this back to the way it was. Oh, electroculture.
What is the secret to growing giant plants? Do you ever remember seeing pictures of giant cabbages or giant pumpkins? What may have been the secret to growing these vegetables is a lost farming technology known as electroculture. The way that electricity affects plants was first observed in 1746 by a Scottish doctor named Dr. Mainbray. He electrified 2 trees and observed them putting forth new branches in October, something which had never happened before. In 1902, physicist Professor Lemstrom visited a lab.
Something funny about this. I have another video that also explains this electroculture farming stuff, where he was describing that the reason why. How do I call these? Like the big tree theory, where we have tree stumps that exist out in the world, and they were really tall trees. Well, I can't remember who I was watching, but they claimed themselves to be a medium, and they said that this the reason why we had those tall trees was because it was a part of a previous civilization's experiments. And one of the things that they discovered was how to make plants just grow incredibly large, right? It reminded me of the movie Sunny with the Chance of Meatballs, right? Is that the movie where food just starts falling from the sky? Either way. Ooh. Oh, here we have this guy. DC Attorney General sues MicroStrategy's Michael Saylor for tax fraud. Now, this is what we call a Bitcoin maximalist. He believes that Bitcoin itself is the only solution to fixing the financial instrument, and he refuses to believe any other asset is a solution to this problem. So, kind of funny to see him get indicted because, you know, people will have their opinions about the crypto market. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I am not a financial advisor, but I wholeheartedly believe that Bitcoin and Ethereum were largely controlled assets. And we can tell this by the speech that Hinman gave in 2018. Because right after Hinman gave that speech, we literally saw Bitcoin and Ethereum not just touch their previous all-time high, but from that point on, break the all-time high and touch it twice, all under the guise and misunderstanding that Bitcoin and Ethereum were allowed into the NASDAQ, or they were giving legal clarity. That's the word that I'm looking for. But in reality, they weren't. And there's already Library is an alternative to YouTube. They already won their case. Ripple's about to win their case. Cardano, like a lot of companies and certain crypto firms have already been sued over this, and all of them look like they're gonna win. And I think it's kind of funny, right? Because the SEC put this to themselves. I always like talking about the dumb things that they print on money. So this is the Vatican coin, and this is what they printed on it. It's kind of like a weird, funny haha joke if we think about it. Oh yeah, here we have that picture of the stuff that was released on like what were supposedly top secret files, quote unquote. But what was funny is this. The fact that they left this Time magazine cover is kind of strange, because if you look at the Time magazine cover, it's kind of like a gag where they're making fun of the previous administration spying on the upcoming administration. So that is it's like a weird nod to be able to make, especially on such a large scale. Here we have more displacements, the displacement of men into a nation that they probably shouldn't be in. I got no problems with people's plights. But when you're being used for somebody else's agenda, yeah, I got a problem with that. Like, straight up. Here we have Serbia beginning to have their protest. Very religious. It's kind of funny. The more east you get, the more Eastern European you get, the more religious they are. And the less bullshit they deal with like LGBTQ, the Open Foundation Society agenda, or just the agenda overall. Very nice. Another food processing facility has caught fire in Montebello. This is a processing plant. This is one of those things that I'll always bring up with not just processing plants, logistics, and understanding the capabilities of a certain nation. Right, just the same way that the nuclear fusion reactor was shut down in Ukraine, that's a point of contention because that's a key part of the infrastructure of the nation. And I'll be showing a different clip to show you that to a large degree, those logistics have already been mapped out and taken account for, not for the purposes of saving humanity, but for the purposes of leveraging blackmail over nations. And it's not very nice. Attention, QAnon maggot fascist. Every time you sing, "We're not gonna take it," remember, it was written by a cross-dressing libtard, tree-hugging half tiny hat who hates everything about you and what you stand for. It was you and people like you that inspired every angry word of that song, so F off. This is also, I don't know who this is, but he also has written like very unnerving messages that all relate to like Pizzagate, Pedogate, and all sorts of other nasty things. Oh yeah. Here's the part that I wanted to talk about. Selective hiring.
Breaking news for all of you who say nothing ever happens, no one's held accountable, these videos don't matter. Out of the Greenwich Public Schools, Superintendent of Schools announcing that Jeremy Bolin has just been placed on administrative leave. This is from the Superintendent of Schools, Tony Jones. Once again, we do not support any opinions that promote discriminatory hiring practices based upon race, religion, gender, or age. This comes 24 hours after our investigation showing Jeremy Bolin saying he does not hire Catholics. Also saying, quote, "I don't think I've interviewed anybody over the age of 30. The older you get, the more conservative."
The more conservative you get. Think about that. Think about that. Who taught him that? That means he has an agenda to make sure that he doesn't get anybody too old, too knowledgeable, or that has the wherewithal to know how to raise kids, right? So this is just age discrimination, but at the same time, this is ideological discrimination. This is the sort of planning that people would be like, oh, this doesn't mean much. This isn't that evil. Like, we shouldn't really worry about these sort of scenarios, but it's like, these people are getting trained to do that, not just in this district, but in every single district, in every single county, in every single city. I know we like to think that it'll never reach our homes, right? I remember very distinctly a few years ago, my sister telling me, I don't have to worry about that. My daughter goes to a good school. There's no way she would ever get introduced to this stuff. And a few months later, she comes back to me and she's like, how did you know? And I'm like, I pay attention to what goes in the docket. I pay attention to what the leaders here in California say. Like, not to sound mean, but like, it kind of makes me happy that I don't have kids in this era, because I wouldn't want that level of worry over my head, especially during these times. There's going to be a part 2 to that video, so I'll probably keep track of it. Now, here's some of the tactics. Now, I always bring up Machiavelli. I always bring up The Prince, the book. But it's because the tactics have not changed. The tactics have been the exact same since the beginning. And I think the reason why is because they probably can't think of newer tactics to use. They've probably just been using the same tactics, and only because they know that the populace, at least the people that they're going to use these tactics against, won't have the wherewithal or the capability of understanding what kind of loop they're stuck in, because by the time they catch the loop, it's already too late. They're already too old, and because the younger generation has no respect for the older generation, you can imagine what happens. But let's take a listen.
In 1943, the following directive was issued from party headquarters to all communists in the United States. It read, "When certain obstructionists become too irritating, label them after suitable build-ups as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic, and use the prestige of anti-fascist and tolerance organizations to discredit them. In the public mind, constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind."
Using labels, name calling, because once you use name calling and once you use these labels and once you essentially corner people in their, what do you want to call it, character destruction, their destroying of their character, it's practically impossible for them to recover. So it's why the book is just saying, use these terms because they have political significance. But notice how they still have political significance, even though we've already, what are we, like 70 years in the future, and these are the exact terms that are still being used today. Like, I don't know. You'd imagine that people would wisen up, but nah, they don't. They never do. It hurts. I'm joking. August 26th. Oh yeah. So somebody actually like zoomed in and got the dates, and one of the documents is dated August 26, 2018, which was the death of John McCain. May 9th, 2018 was right around the time that Trump was pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. Are these the documents the FBI claimed that were nuclear, supposedly? And how does John McCain play a role? Very spicy. And this was the picture. Actually, I should just turn on the media viewer first. And this is the picture of what we were looking at. Knock, knock. We're watching. Either way. Here we have, what is this? It's about the Iran deal. Or at least, the entire situation is unfolding and the doc and questions are not about Trump's crimes. They are about the deep state crimes. It's about the Iran deal. The Iran deal was $100 billion slush fund, $100 billion slush fund, impacting all of Trump's enemies in high crimes and treason. Because you have to remember, there was a level of complacency with decisions that were made in the war in the Middle East. That means people's signatures were signed, things were approved, things were pushed forward, charities, agendas, nonprofits. I still remember a situation in 2014 where there were nonprofits that were discovered that were being used to kind of funnel money to certain rebel armies in Syria. And that story disappeared off the face of the earth, right? And that was something that I learned when I wasn't even in this the way that I am now. Here we have more information on that. Okay, I might have found something interesting. The doc cites August 26, 2018, which was a Sunday. Trump didn't make any public appearances, but the next day, Trump hosted the president of Kenya at the White House and left the left-wing media hated it. I don't know if this is a connection from the Mar-a-Lago docs, but there is an angle here. Iran deal, Kenya, and Spygate all leads to Obama. I'm not sure how the president of Kenya would lead to Obama, but there is something interesting going on in Africa with, I think it was Nigeria, that they got to open up a very specific kind of exchange market that's a commodities exchange, where they're going to primarily deal in the exchange of precious metals, precious goods, and cryptocurrencies, which is also something that was opened up in Brazil. So, I don't know. Much to still see unfold is the way I see it. Oh, I found a funny commercial. Because we talk about fluoride in our toothpaste. I guess Michael Myers thought it'd be funny to make the inverse joke, but with sugar.
Headley and White, the British toothpaste.
It's the only toothpaste we ever use.
Headley and White is the toothpaste that makes brushing a pleasure. That's because its mild cleaning agent is enhanced by 2 teaspoons of pure cane sugar for a smile that says, yum, that was good.
And it tastes great on a cracker.
And it tastes great on a cracker. Oh, my boy. Either way. We have a veteran FBI agent resigns after the allegation surfaced that he ran Hunter Biden laptop interference. Now, there is something to be said about interagency fuckery. There are these certain positions in the FBI, the DOJ, and I'd imagine any other office of Department of Homeland or whatever, where you have the power to do certain things, right? Like in this case, this fool had the power to stop this case from going forward, right? And it's just like, all right, when it comes down to equality and being equal in application of the law towards its citizens, the FBI and the DOJ is like, fuck that. But when it comes down to protecting the elite, the oligarchs, and the bourgeoisie, they spy on everybody. They'll spy on the journalist. They'll spy on the person that gave that journalist the information. They'll also raid all the other houses that have all the evidence, and they'll be like, all right, cool. It's like rules for thee, but not for me. Bank of America announces 0 down payments, 0 closing cost mortgages for blacks and Hispanics first-time home buyers. You know how many people I knew that bought a house? I knew quite a few people that bought houses recently, and honestly, I feel so sorry for them. Like, it's not the time to be doing that. Here we have Elon Musk. Sounds higher than 5%. 8 in 10 Twitter accounts are fake, says experts. Yeah, I have a Twitter account and I don't even use it, right? But again, I can't believe this case has moved the way it has, but it is good to know that we're going to get some hard logistics into understanding that this is because we have to remember, right? Bringing up the gay guy who used to be a Mormon, right? where he's making fun of that his conversion therapist who was trying to turn him straight. He said that LGBTQ people are worse than his conversion therapist, right? In this case, I'd make the argument that tech companies are worse than that, because their whole idea is we're not just going to coerce one person. We're not just going to stop one person. We're not going to stop one group. We're going to shape and mold the entire minds of the whole world. That's drastic. Like that's another step further. You know what I mean? We have a 20-year-old. These stories. All right. The reason why I picked this though was because he had the star on his shirt, and the reason why I bring that up is because we talked about in one of the previous episodes of Matrix News, where there was a singer who was supposedly a rock star, and I noticed that they didn't mention his name at all, but his name was Zion. They'll talk about how this dude passed away from the AstraZeneca shot, but yet, in this case, I just think it's weird how they highlighted this specific picture of him with that star on it, because if you know anything about the news, if you know anything about the weird little occultic things that go on behind the scenes with these weirdos, you'd realize that to some degree they use the news to pass on messages to one another. I just find it incredibly funny that we see a star of David. Meanwhile, the last time I talked about this was some dude named. All right, here you go. It's kind of funny how this lines up. I did this perfectly then.
Why you are targeting the second biggest exporter of food in the bloody world to destroy its farming base? Why are you doing that?
I got the answer. Let me open up the video though.
All natural resources, including all food on the international market.
Okay, I've talked about this video before, but what was the timestamp that I had? It was, all right, 8:40, 8:50, 8:54. I guess the reason why I bring this up is this is for family lineages. This has been the same family running this entire thing. I find it incredible, astonishing. It astonishes me every time when I hear these sort of, because I Googled it and I'm like, oh, even to this day, even to right now, one of their family members is still in a very important position of government. Just want to let you know.
Now, today we have the post-World War II United Nations system, which itself has branches. UNESCO, the branch for education, science, and culture, headed by eugenicist Julian Huxley, who's from that original eugenics family, which included the Darwins, the Galtons, and T.H. Huxley, who was the elder grandfather of the author, Aldous Huxley, and Julian Huxley, the first head of UNESCO, also a transhumanist. You also have the United Nations Population Fund, which makes gross characterizations and recommendations, especially in developing and third world countries. You also have mechanisms like the World Bank and the IMF, now in the present day, using loan availability to supposedly improve and develop these countries.
But only for those loans to then be weaponized against them and da-da-da-da-da. Actually,
as a condition to meet population reduction goals. Yes, there are population reduction goals, and the deep secret is that there's a global population database apparatus in use.
This database, right? So I always wondered why, now more than ever, with the advent of cell phones, with the advent of how much information could be gathered on people nowadays, it just made me think maybe the reason why certain areas are getting displaced into Europe, why certain Latin American nations are being tossed into America, I largely started to assume, I think that these people are picked. primarily for the reason of who they are and what kind of people they are. And it's all to destabilize, cause division, cause internal strife. The way I see it is they're setting up dominoes. They're setting up dominoes in order for them to fall. And actually, I should probably show this video now before I move forward. And the reason why I say that it's important to be mindful of these sort of events is because we could end up with situations like this, where there is no history, there is nothing left.
It's the most disturbing thing I have ever seen in my career, and I desperately need your guys' help. No music on this video. I'm not even a say pawn man. It's inappropriate. I had a customer reach out and tell me that they have this old book of photos from World War II. It's been in their family for a while, and they wanted me to try and sell it. I said, okay, not knowing.
Remember, in the last video that I just showed, he in the beginning said that, oh no, I don't think I showed that portion. But he talks about how all of these implementations of these devices, of databases, of DNA trackers, of population control, of food control, all of these mechanisms were covertly added to verbiage from the UN and these other mechanisms they developed after World War II. They got more covert with it. My guess is they've had enough control over the world that they could then do covert actions through, basically doing it the legal way, buying things out, manipulating people, manipulating lawyers, manipulating judges, etc., etc. But I bring back the fact that without keeping track of that sort of data, events like this are called a lie because there is no proof of it. We're looking at a very interesting experiment be rolled out across the world because people think that there's no proof of it, or there is no proof of, how do I word this? Evidence that would suggest that these things are happening.
What I was getting into. Now, the book starts out, okay, the soldier is stationed in Southeast Asia, probably around 1937, 1938, he goes over there, and it starts out okay. We see the domain of the Golden Dragon. This is like kind of a gimmick thing. You get this for crossing the 180th meridian. And this person, he's a great photographer. He's photographing life in China and Southeast Asia before World War II really ramped up. However, so many incredible, well-done photographs. This guy not only was a great photographer, he had a great camera, but the pictures start to get more war-related here. And then I got to this page, and I cannot show you guys what's beyond this page. And I had no idea. When I got that book on Monday, and I opened it up, and I got beyond that page, I screamed. Somehow, that guy who took those photos was present for the rape of Nanking, and he took about 30 photographs that are unknown to history that are worse than anything I've seen on the internet in color. And those photos are in black and white. If you guys,
I don't know how to bring this up, but these photos are essentially not supposed to exist, right? Imagine the amount of documentation on behalf of corporations that exist that prove some of the most egregious shit, but yet, because we don't have access to their filing cabinets, and because we don't have access to their ledgers, their books, their accountants, and any of that information that would lead us to believe any of this, we don't know, right? A lot of people are, not a lot of people, but in discovering the truth, that's where we're stuck. We're stuck in trying to get evidence of this stuff.
Don't know about the rape of Nanking. This is the script for it. I'm going to film a TikTok explaining what it is, probably tomorrow. In short, it's one of the worst human atrocities of all time. One of the worst acts of World War II. One of the worst things to ever happen in human history. I majored in Japanese studies, and we covered the rape of Nanking. And I remember my professors telling me that photographic evidence was mostly destroyed by the Japanese. There are very, very few photographs out there. And this guy took photos of things that I've read about in books that I didn't.
Now imagine all of the photos, all of the relics, all of the buildings, all of the history that was destroyed during World War II, during all of the Blitzkriegs. Does nobody ever account for that?
Didn't even realize anybody had ever documented before. The simple fact is, and here's what I need your guys' help for. I don't own that book. I'm not going to buy it. I probably couldn't even afford it. I have no idea what it's worth. It's probably very, very expensive, but the simple fact is a museum needs to take that. Even though those photographs are horrible, if it was up to me, I'd make viewing those photos mandatory for everyone on Earth. I can't sell it to a...
And sadly, we live in America where that's not going to happen. American culture dictates that we should care more about Jewish culture than we should care about any other culture. And I'll say that to anybody's face because it gets me angry that Americans by and large have to care about an atrocity that did not happen here. I get it. We should learn about it. But what about all the other atrocities that happen here on stateside? I think it's more important to learn about those because they're more relevant to our culture than learning about some tiny hat expedition that was completely led by American capitalism, that was completely designed to destroy Germany and to leave all of its citizens completely with nothing. And this was all planned very well in advance, especially if you look at the paperwork with IBM and their involvement in the logistics program. Either way, I lost my page, I know. Either way, scrolling back up to the original video where I wanted to go. Actually, no, it's on the browser. Okay, this is the second portion of this, but I do have to mention, now this is the U.S. aid hidden weapon. After World War II, things went very covert and very secret. Now, let me give you an example of how.
Environmental factors. Then there's where eugenics gets into foreign policy. Starting under the LBJ administration, Skull and Bones and Bush brother under the skin, William Draper, began advising LBJ on the need for the USAID agency, which could provide birth control in the third world for overpopulated countries. That led directly into the Nixon phase, where you had Henry Kissinger proposing the use of food as a weapon and his other draconian proposals under National Security Memorandum number 200.
Now let's think about all of the protesters, the farmers, all over the world that are currently protesting about them having to destroy their crop. Protesting about how the cops and local enforcement are harassing them and preventing them from harvesting or planting a new crop. Let's talk about how certain farms here in the United States were forcibly told to install security cameras to make sure that they weren't tending to their fields. I wonder where this all started.
Would food be considered an instrument of national power? Is the U.S. prepared to accept food rationing to help people who won't control their population growth? Family planning performance and population control should be taken into account for appraisal of assistance requirements by USAID, meaning that the degree to which they reduce their population numbers should account for how much food aid they're going to receive.
So if you don't play along and if you don't pay attention, well, you know what's going to happen. And, you know, I always thought it was funny because you see a lot of people actually bring up this.
How did men go from this to this? We used to...
Well, how did we? Eugenicists, that's how. The fact that it was completely planned out after World War II, what they were going to do with the population. This is why I always bring up the Macy's Conference, the Tavistock Institute, the Rockefeller Institute. They had a complete vested interest in shaping the way that we view the world, the way that we think, the way that we digest education, and the way that we perceive life. And yet people want to believe that, no, I'm a free individual. I'm a real boy. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I wish to. I wish for that too. Here's a great example of it's dark.
Same company who released this show just released this show. If you don't know about this...
One more time. The same people who released this show...
Same company who released this show just released this show. If you don't know about this, you need to. Released on August 25th, here is the official description for the show, Little Demon. 13 years after being impregnated by Satan, a reluctant mother Laura and her Antichrist daughter Chrissy attempt to live an ordinary life in Delaware, but are constantly thwarted by monstrous forces, including Satan, who yearns for custody of his daughter's soul. And take a listen to what a few of the cast members from this show had to say.
I love that we are normalizing paganism. Laura is a pagan. She's a witch. She's jacked. She's got to protect her daughter from demons. And
I don't know what to say. Me personally, I don't know what to say about paganism, but the one thing I could say is that it is making a comeback in a weird way. But back to the electrocution of farming.
So if you've been getting into farming or gardening, you should look into electroculture and Justin Cristo Flow. Now, we've put a lot of blogs up about electroculture, the benefits of copper, the benefits of brass, all these different types of metals which can help enhance the energy and the yields so that you can grow more food. Now, Justin Cristo Flow was an advocate for electroculture because he learned if you use different types of antennas, you could increase your crop yields by anywhere from 20 to 100%. Now, government agencies and big chemical companies such as Monsanto and DuPont did not like his inventions because they went against the promotion of chemical fertilizers. If you look at a lot of farming nowadays with monoculture and all of these chemicals, we're not really farming. We're just spraying chemicals and pretty much drugs all over the plants so that they sprout up, but then they're pretty much getting all of the nutrients and all the vitamins ripped out of them. We don't need to do that anymore, and we can utilize...
This always gets me so angry. But it is decent to look into electroculture. I think what's more important is understanding that it's not just the fact that when we go to the hardware store, when we go to Home Depot, when we go to Lowe's, that when we buy these chemicals, it's much worse than that. They put it in the air. This is why chemtrails are such a huge issue. Like, this was a few years ago when my mom still had the ability to go back to Mexico, where she was talking to people from her village, still in the middle of nowhere, and they were talking about how it became incredibly difficult to grow certain foods. And my mom gave them the suggestion of looking on YouTube. And straight up, the answer they got was, oh, let's test the soil. Like, if we want to find out what's really the problem, let's test the soil. So they got together, grabbed soil samples, put their money together, and tested the soil, only to figure out that there were certain elevated aspects of something that was making the soil acidic, and that they had to do certain things, grind certain rocks, and that helped them produce their next harvest. But where did the high level of acidity come from? And if you're a conspiracy theorist and you look into this, it comes down to the constant use of chemicals. Some people will say chemtrails. Other people will say dirty water. Just the fact that there is no more fresh water, right? The concept of fresh water is kind of weird. Overly elevated levels of aluminum is what I heard. It gets difficult without trying to explain chemtrails, and I did not read anything about that right now. So America needs to build 478 chargers per day, right? Those charging stations for cars, until 2030, if just half of drivers switch to electric vehicles. That's a pipe dream. This is why I always talk about that the infrastructure was not ready. I think what they really wanted to do was push this whole jab issue for 12 years for them to have enough time to actually build out the infrastructure. Because realistically, with the way that electricity production looks like and the numbers that they have, it looks like nowhere near what they would need in order to completely have this electric grid issue thing. That's why they wanted to start off with smart cities first, but I'm aware of that. That's not going to work. And here's some more PSYOP news. Currently, China's experiencing a heat wave. Chinese supermarket is packed with elderly people because of the heat wave. And it's not just there. It's also people.
What's going on in China? They shut
Straight
off
up, people
power
just
in
hanging
China
out by the
and
river. There's another video. Here it is.
Everyone needs to know what is happening in China right now. For the last 70 days straight, China have been experiencing the most extreme heat event in world history, and for some reason, no one is talking about it. Lakes and rivers have dried up, crops have been killed, factories have been closed, and this heat wave is still raging on. Just for perspective, this is the lake bed of China's largest freshwater source, and this is the state of the third largest river in the world. On top of that, 66 of their other rivers have dried up completely. In the daytime, you're seeing temperatures of 45 degrees Celsius. Then at night, you're not even getting a break as it's hovering around a staggering 34 degrees. A weather historian said that there is nothing in the world climatic history which is even minimally comparable to what is happening in China right now. He says that it combines the most extreme intensity with the most extreme length with an incredibly huge area all at the same time. And the effects of something this extreme is going to affect us all. I mean, we saw the prices of food, fuel, and energy soar due to the situation in Ukraine, and this is predicted to make things a lot worse than they already are because we depend on China far more for imports than Russia and Ukraine. Experts are warning to prepare for global shortages and soaring prices as China's seemingly never-ending heat wave sears on.
Kinda effed, right? And this is why I look at Elon Musk talk about how we need more people, like we need to up our population numbers. I don't know. The way I look at it, the way I see China is they're not afraid to completely do away with large slews of their people. China has done it before. If you look at the agenda that they've had for over 500 years of completely replacing every other ethnic group, should kind of lead you on to understand what kind of thought process this sort of country has. And what I just said right now should be viewed under the context of weather manipulation. But you know, we can't go that far. We can't go that far.
Guys, come on, guys.
Cute puppies. Either way, here's a
I'm just stopping by the store and I see they wrote this on the wall outside of the store. 13 nights owe me money. I made thousands of songs already. They made me do this. War is coming. They kill babies in the Capitol. Antichrist. And it says 1983 in between each of them. They also wrote this. The government doesn't want you to live. 1983.
Very weird woo-woo that is currently progressing forward in the world. Report, at minimum, 20 whistleblowers have stepped forward. FBI personnel are demanding Chris Wray to step down. I don't know what to say about the FBI. Just because, you know, you learn their history and you learn why they were built as an organization. You tend to be less sympathetic with all the dumb shit that they've done over the years.
America's a different story. As soon as America starts running out of money and people start getting broke in America, it's a free-for-all. As soon as people start I can't eat. Look at the looting.
That looting shit was fucking
Bro, there's no morality. Crazy. So you're saying what's going to happen? I'm saying in the Western world, without morality, the only thing that keeps people in line is fear of the law. The second that's gone, you better get on a jet, G. It's going to be a fucking shit show.
I think some crazy shit's about to go down in our lifetime.
Shit show, man.
I don't believe, well, to some degree, things are going to go worse. That I do believe in. But will we get that far? I tend to be very disbelief about it. I already showed this China video. I already showed the rape of Nan King. Oh, here's one that I love the most. Just because I always tell my friends, if you think these laws, right, because they always talked about utopias and this is what we need to do to save this country and that. And I'm like, dude, if you give the government that much power, you should know that they will use that against you eventually. It happens every single time in history. And this is a great example of it.
My name is Joey Lynn Massaros. I'm a stay-at-home mom in New Braunfels, Texas. You probably don't know me directly, but I bet you remember when the Biden bus drove through New Braunfels and there was a Trump train that drove Trump flags next to the Biden bus. I was part of that Trump train, and now the Biden-Harris campaign staff, White House officials, officials and Democrat politicians that were on the bus are suing me and my husband in federal court under the Ku Klux Klan law for exercising free speech because they're offended by our presence on the road that day. They are claiming that we banded together.
And this is something that I always bring up. It's not about ideology. It's not about what color you wear. It's not about what team you're on. It's about, are you saying the right things? Okay, that means I won't hurt you. I'll let you be a nice little idiot. Go back to work. Meanwhile, right, if you have a different opinion, it doesn't matter what law. Like, they'll use anything they have in their power to make you a dissenting opinion and to make, you know, it's kind of for my first YouTube channel, it's why for a very long time I never showed my face, right? Because I always had that connotation of, if I attach my face to the QAnon movement, it's a wrap for me. Means, like, you know what I mean? Because it comes with certain consequences attaching your face to certain ideology, certain movements, certain connotations. But it's all a label, because at the end of the day, the people who are in power will just use just about anything they have at their disposal to go after people. That's just a constant. And here we have another tanker briefly blocks the Egypt's Suez Canal. Very interesting. But shortly, not a whole lot. Oh yeah, I found these covers. I thought they looked very nice. I kind of tend to save stuff like this for art references' sake. Either way, moving on. Ooh, yeah, I wanted to talk about this.
Realm-wide event of soil liquefaction.
Right, talking about just hitting it with the right vibration. And I'm only bringing it up because of that famous story with what was his name? Nikola Tesla. He created an earthquake machine, and in him creating that earthquake machine, he basically caused this earthquake in New York, and it was unheard of, and this and that. And right, 369, those interesting woo-woo numbers, and the mud flood theory might have something to do with his creation. I usually stop myself there. So, Rockefeller Foundation wants behavioral scientists to figure out why people are refusing to take their why people are refusing to take their shibby shots. I don't know why they would match. I think they just need to be good people, man. They need to be good citizens. I want to show this commercial. So I found this commercial first, only to wonder to myself, who is this guy, right? Like, what? Russia walking into a Pizza Hut. It's Gorbachev.
Это из-за него у нас в экономике бардак.
Да благодаря ему у нас новые возможности.
Это из-за него у нас политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас свобода.
Полный хаос.
Перспективы.
Политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас есть Писахат.
Freedom. But very interesting how this commercial's told in the story of the older gentleman, right? Because he was the last leader of the Soviet Union, right? So we have an older gentleman who still sees as capitalism as the problem. And we have the younger generation who understands that to some degree, we do need to incorporate this level of capitalism in order to have some more economic opportunities. And apparently it was Gorbachev who actually gave those opportunities out. I think I have the video. Yeah, I have the video of Putin paying respects. Very interesting. But I can imagine that he is a very important individual for seeing a change in Russia, considering that for a very long time they saw capitalistic practices as something that wasn't very good. And one could make the argument that Vladimir Putin got to walk into his position because of Gorbachev. So I don't know what else to say about that because I don't know much about Russian politics. We have Yesenia Gomez. Yesenia? I'm Mexican and I don't even know how to pronounce this chick's name. 39 was put into custody on August 12th and charged with trafficking women in the Bronx and nearby Westchester County. She lured hundreds of migrants into working as late night workers by posting fake online ads. And this is one instance of it. I remember when the first caravan came over, I want to say 2018, there was an instance where there was another bust that there was somebody offering money towards girls. But I think this was for Brazil. Specifically it was a Brazil bust that occurred. Can't remember too much about it. Too long ago. Oh yeah, I like talking about this one. Here we have a library found in Tibet containing 84,000 secret manuscripts, books, including history of mankind for over 1,000 years. Sakya Monastery in Tibet and the Vatican have the largest libraries in the world in the history of the planet and beyond. There was a point in time that one could assume that there was artifact sites in the Middle East that related to Sumeria, but if you look at where some of these tablets were found during the war in the Middle East, those were some of the areas that were carpet bombed the most. And I keep track of this agenda where anytime there's been an ancient civilization that believes in something very specific, what you see or what you tend to see happen is they get their complete culture monopolized and erased. And then the history that gets put forth is something a bit of a scatter, where they won't have the entirety of it, but they'll have enough of it to paint you as a savage, paint you as somebody uneducated, paint them as somebody, right? It's usually the Western world or the Smithsonian trying to paint other civilizations as not being adequate for a modern paradigm. Just thought I should mention that. So we have Jim Brewer. All right, this guy. I really like this guy.
Listen, when I was down,
I like this guy. I do not like Crowder. I think Crowder's Crowder's stuck in the closet because for a very long time I always wondered, how do you have a wife that hot and not have a kid? For real, how do you, for real?
dancing around the Hollywood scene, every single executive, ABC, NBC, every single one of them, CBS, I saw them when they walked in the room, the decision makers. Let's just say they weren't really family men.
No.
And they really were pushing a different agenda for what I wanted to put out there. And that's when I realized too, this isn't just television. This goes into magazines and everything else.
Sure.
Who runs the show? Who makes the decisions? They're all angry, anti-family, anti-moral, anti-faith people.
Right.
And it is staggering.
And the reason why these corporatists, these oligarchs, or the bourgeoisie are like that is because the only thing somebody working in corporate cares about is the bottom line. They care about profit. That's all they care about. If it ain't making them money, if it ain't getting them the ratings they want, and if whatever pet project they decided to give you money for isn't returning their investment, they'll shut you down completely. Especially if it doesn't feed into the agenda in most cases. Let's go to, what else we got? Bon Francis declares mankind, oh boy, here we go. Justin, Pope Francis declares that mankind is experiencing the outbreak of World War III during an audience at the Vatican. My boy, that happened in 2001. Like, let's be for real. But I think the war that he's specifically talking about is not a war of nation against nation, but it's the war of nations against corporate monopolies, the corporatocracy, the oligarchs, the people that actually hold the wealth, the peoples whose names are associated with all of these trust funds that are used as black budget programs. Like, I think that's who he's really talking about. He's not really talking about one nation going up against another nation. Or at least that's the calling card, because I see the word Ukraine here, and that's just an excuse for weapons companies to make more money. Oh, I like this video. No offense, but the demise of Europe is something that I love to watch.
Wow.
The moment that it struck 12 at night, it ended the tax break, and all the prices went up.
Wow.
I just love his surprise. Okay, here we go. Who's this guy? No, wait, there's this. Just then, Moscow will not supply oil to those who introduce a price cap on Russian oil, says Russian Deputy Prime Minister ahead of the G7 meeting. Ooh, that's basically posturing, where one nation is posturing to the other nation of, I don't care what you bring to me. I don't care how you decide to bribe me. We're not changing this, right? And the reason you can assume this is because Biden, all right, so the powers that be refuse to open American manufacturing. They refuse to open American manufacturing in the sense of oil production. They do not want the refineries open. They do not want the oils open, like the fields open. None of it. They do not want to give more money to the original oil barons of here, the States, because it's kind of like a power play, right? Because they saw all of these oil guys back Trump. So in a weird way, it's kind of like it's one group attacking another group of rich people because how dare you back that individual? How dare you go against us? How dare you bite the hand that feeds? Nobody really thinks about that, but I do. Oh yeah, Russia's, dude, nobody would have, and the only person who actually called out that Russia was about to make all of Europe its bitch was Trump. And that is absolutely hilarious to me, because how did he predict that? Does he know the future? Time traveler? No. This is what you call a very, very interesting war that is going on between very, very specific factions. There's no way for me to describe this because, again, the people that we're fighting against have no allegiance to no nation, no flag, no ideology. The only thing these people care about is the bottom line. Get me those resources. Get me the rights to that land. Make sure you get rid of X, Y, and Z and all these other people, right? Either way, move on.
These policies that are ESG driven and morally driven, that we should convert everything to alternative energy tomorrow, are going to end up starving the poor children of the world. Like it's and killing many of them. So it's counterintuitive that could actually happen, and that's what we're seeing, Melissa, with the prices at $1,000 a megawatt hour, 1,000 euros a megawatt hour. You know, you're going to see real problems in Europe. I can't believe it's not on the front page of every paper every day.
And this is why I always bring up the displacement of men in Europe, because I just hate seeing people get deceived, right? To see a bunch of young men get deceived into perpetuating a war against people who had absolutely no dealings in their misfortunes in life, that really hurts me. Just because, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like karma should be dished out on those who actually deserve it, not random citizens who had nothing to do with those events. But, you know, explaining all that, very difficult. Here we have Texas border officials make biggest drug bust in 20 years after finding almost $12 million worth of cocaine disguised as baby wipes. I read the article ahead of time. Very interesting. Here we have, the Brazilian elections are going on, right? For those who don't know or aren't aware, Bolsonaro, the Trump of the tropics is what they called him back in the day. But his opponent is essentially making the same arguments that Democrats make here. you know, social welfare. We need to care about the minorities. We need to care about the poor people, this and that, right? All that rhetoric that has been used for the last 20 years here in the States is constantly used in Brazil. I can't remember the name of a movie that I watched. It was a Brazilian movie, and it was really telling, where you really saw political leaders work alongside favela gang leaders in order to get certain kids off the street because they were informants or they were important pieces to the gang. And that to me was mind-blowing, right? Because I think I was like 15. I was in high school for sure when I watched that film. Was not expecting that level of whoa. Here we have a PBS program from 1983, Project Bluebeam. I just realized 1983, and that was the 1983 in the wall.
If enough people believe that something is real, then it is real in its effects.
In terms of its social reality.
In terms of the social reality, in terms of what people act according to their beliefs.
Yeah.
And that opens a question of, really at two levels, perhaps something that we are creating ourselves, perhaps a series of images that we are projecting. I think Carl Jung came very close to expressing that idea in one of his books. Or could it be manipulated purposely by people who have the technology to simulate UFO sightings? And people say, well, of course not. Who would do a thing like that? Well, I would remind you that during the Watergate investigation, it was discovered that there was a plan originated in the White House.
Watergate, right? Let's remember Watergate, right? Because this whole Trump thing, a lot of them were saying this is bigger than Watergate. And I was like, Watergate, right? I know what Watergate is. It's when Nixon was taping a bunch of people that were going into the White House and became this giant scandal. But one of the lawyers that worked on that case was Hillary Clinton. Just wanted to mention that. But he's bringing up the fact that during that investigation, they discovered about Project Bluebeam and how there was a plan, or at least there was an idea that was had in order to use this program of holograms in order to incite a certain state. Hold on, I'll just let it play.
To surface a submarine off the coast of Cuba and paint the second coming of Christ over the island of Cuba using holograms, which is well within our technology today. The idea was that since there is a large Catholic population in Cuba, they would be so upset by this vision that this would saturate the communication channels, the telephone system in Cuba, long enough for an invasion to take place.
Right? That's all they wanted. They wanted to suffocate the communication system of Cuba. So that means, to some degree, there had to be a scouting agent to get that intel. So that means they knew the fact that their communication system could not handle an influx of calls. So they were like, all right, let's fake Jesus to these people just so that they fuck up the telephone lines and we can invade very quickly. Like, what?
How interesting. I never heard of that.
Well, I think that's a classic in psychological warfare, but that kind of manipulation is well understood, and I have personally investigated several apparently genuine UFO cases where there was, in fact, a manipulation. My conclusion, the conclusion of scientists working with me, was that there was, in fact, a manipulation taking place, and that it was not a hoax on the part of the witnesses, but a hoax on the part of somebody much better organized than...
So this is investigator Dr. Jacques Vallée. Very interesting how I found this interview. Either way, moving on. We pick up, we move on. Here it is. According to newly released emails obtained by the state attorney general, Facebook and the Biden administration arranged weekly monthly calls. Oh man, to discuss what to censor on the platform. I just really wanted to laugh. Because I find these sorts of instances incredibly funny, right? Because I know a lot of people, at least I remember a lot of the rhetoric that was said earlier on from 2018 to 2019 about how it's impossible to do this, there's no meaningful way that you can control the algorithms, this and that. And I'm like, I remember somebody even saying that the ability to control the internet and to control a trend is impossible. And I was just like, do you not, like, you're trying to debunk algorithms. And last time I checked, algorithms exist for everything, right? Pandora Radio was one of the first companies to develop an algorithm where the primary focus was to suggest you music that you would probably like. So you might not be able to control the whole trend, but you might be able to control aspects of the trend. And I think that's what algorithms are for. But you know, to see one agency work alongside another agency, it's like, yeah, we're doing good. We're doing good for the future. Yeah, no, I don't believe it. Either way, yeah, I think I'm gonna end this here. My name is Ramirez. Thanks for watching another episode of Matrix News.